On the Fix, we like to get to the heart of things. Our first panel discussion focuses on the prevalence of sexual harassment and intimidation by men in positions of power towards women, both in the private and public sector. This, of course, comes off the back of the sexual harassment allegations levelled against the ANC spokesperson, Mr. Pule Mabe, and former Western Cape ANC leader, Marius Fransman, as well as the sexual harassment probe at the SABC. Well, to discuss the issues, I'm joined by Fatima Shabodien, who is the director or former director at ANCWL South Africa, and we also joined this morning by Ms. Precious Banda from the ANC Women's League. Ladies, good morning. Welcome to The Fix.
Good morning. Thank you to the listeners.
Precious, let me start with you. You've come under severe criticism from other female organizations and gender organizations for not doing enough to protect young women in the African National Congress. You have rebutted this and you've said that you've come out first. What is the ANC Women's League's formal position on the allegations of sexual harassment, both against Mr. Fransman as well as Mr. Pule Mabe?
Thank you so much, Karima. When the cases then of Fransman and now of Pule happened or came to the fore, the ANC Women's League was the first organization to issue a statement to say we stand with the victim. Even in this case of Comrade Pule, it's the ANC Women's League that issued a statement to declare our support with the victim, to offer all forms of support emotionally and otherwise to the victim, and to call for the suspension of Comrade Pule. When the hearing was taking place, at the grievance hearing was taking place, it is us that were by the side of the victim throughout. So we also issued the poster as young women of the ANC Women's League to declare still our support on top of the statement that was issued by the ANC Women's League. So I really do not understand the criticism, and it comes to a thing that we have always raised as the ANC Women's League to say we fail to understand why other organizations that advance the same causes as always want to divert attention from what should be the core of the issue, but to attacking us. So every time there's an issue of sexual violence or rape, other organizations want to tell the Women's League how it acts rather than uniting with the ANC Women's League to speak about the case. It happened with the Omotoso case where all of us should be speaking in one voice. We were now put backwards by criticizing each other, therefore leaving the case that we must unite our energies.
But if we come to the Omotoso case, just to be quite specific, there were actually people in ANC Women's Regalia in support of Mr. Omotoso. You were deeply embarrassed by that, and then you had to move into action. So this confusion that some of the organizations have about whether you sacrifice women at the altar of your political party's convenience isn't unfounded.
Even that one, the state of events is also not correct, as you put it. We were in court from day one. The ANC Women's League, as an organization, its leaders and those who represent it, were in the Omotoso case from day one.
And what about those who came to support him?
Those that came to support him, we still spoke. The leadership of the ANC Women's League in PE stood outside the court and said we distance ourselves from such people, we distance ourselves from women who wear our colors and in support of Omotoso, and we reiterated our position to say we stand with the victims and we are here to offer our support with the victims. So it's not true that we only moved into the case after those women came. No, we were there. That's why at the same courtroom outside where the other women who were supporting Omotoso in our colors were, the leadership was there, right there, saying those do not represent us.
Fatima, let me bring you in. You are part of the total shutdown movement that, of course, brought women, intersectional women, together from a wide range of organizations. There's complaints from the African National Congress Women's League that you guys don't like working with them and that you exclude them and that you point fingers at them. Is that a true reflection of your own experience in trying to bring maximum unity among women to deal with the question of predation and sexual violence against women?
Look, Karima, I think, with all respect to my sister from the Women's League, we cannot rewrite history here. We were at the Jacob Zuma rape trial. Women of South Africa will never forgive and forget the role that the Women's League took up in that rape trial. And it's been entirely inconsistent in responding to allegations of sexual harassment and sexual violation of women in our country. Of late, and I do want to recognize there's been more consistency in coming out in support of victims first and foremost, but the history of the Women's League in the post-apartheid era has been to come out in support of predators first and foremost. We will never forget how Kwesi's life was threatened by Women's League members outside the court case. We've seen consistently there was muted confusion around Marius Fransman. Manana was supported even when there was evidence on camera. So we can't sit here and listen to the Women's League tell us that it has the sterling record to defend our rights. And the reason why it's such a crisis for us is the Women's League is possibly the biggest member organization of working class women in our country. And we want them to speak in the interest of women and not have this history of contradiction.
Okay, Peter?
Can I please respond to this?
Yeah, go on.
Go for
Thank you. It's not true, firstly, that the ANC Women's League supported Manana. That's part of the lies that are circulated by those that want to weaken the voice of women. It is the ANC Women's League that named and shamed Manana. It's us. It's us that called for the resignation of Manana. Manana's resignation did not come because he wished or he felt like. He succumbed to the pressure that we put to structures as the ANC Women's League. We put that pressure to structures of the ANC. It's us that stood and said, we stand with the victim, and we're there in court with the victim of Manan until the conclusion of the case. And also, always wanting to bring us back to the Kwesi case. I was not there, by the way. I'm young. I was not an activist of the ANC Women's League then. But for those that were in the ANC Women's League, and I'm challenging them to do research, the ANC Women's League as an organization still took a stance and issued positions in support of the victims that we have now today, because these statements are there and still exist in the media. But the ANC Women's League cannot be locked into moments that because the ANC Women's League 10 years ago took this particular stance, or its members or its leaders were seen to be taking this particular stance parallel to that of the organization, then today as activists we cannot express ourselves or to stand for ourselves, because this is our lived experience. We cannot speak for ourselves or stand for ourselves because 10 years ago.
Can I just make the point that what little I know about the history of women's struggles in the world, I mean, this kind of argument between, not factions of it, but as you know, being part of this debate and this action and this growth for well over a century. There's been division all the time. Surely the question to answer is how do you stop it? I mean, how does my daughter or my sister or my mother go to work and not feel as if she's carrying an extra burden other than me, that is going to involve her, some guy touching her up or looking at her in a funny way or treating her with less than proper respect. And I just don't understand. I mean, I do understand how the politics become divided. But in South Africa, and it doesn't, not only in South Africa, but I mean, we have a particular problem here. You know, is the total shutdown the way to go? How do you just get men to appreciate the fact that the gradual liberation of men? I mean, I'm 66, so I remember when women's lib was the thing. It's actually empowered men, and made men more comfortable simply because their sisters and their daughters and their mothers are better for it. They're better people, more confident people.
Fatima?
And they've had a good, we've actually benefited much more than we realize, I think.
Well, I do think because of the laws that we fought for, there are some women who are better off in our country than maybe your wife was or your mother was. But the reality is that the majority of women in our country still suffer because of patriarchy. And for me, the big challenge is how do we shift prevailing values around patriarchy. And this is where the Women's League has not been helpful. Because when there's charges of sexual harassment, the default position of a women's rights organization should be to come out in defense of the rights of the woman. There's been too much obsession with the rights of the man as a member, as an NSC member. We have to start role modeling from the top, and that means zero tolerance. Whether you're the president, whether you're the member of an NSC, whether you're the MP, the default position should be that women go out and speak up against significant odds. All these women who find their voices, or who we find our listening for, eventually do so against significant odds, and they suffer as a result of it afterwards. So I think what we owe women who do find their voices is to listen to them, to believe them as a matter of process, and to not come out in defense of predators and those who are accused of these acts.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about sort of suffering afterwards, I mean, you mean literally people are hurt and injured or belittled and insulted because of what they...
In very, very real and practical ways. We see now in the social justice sector, the consequence of it is that women fear that they are unemployable because the men who are acting in the interest of the predators are so powerful. They control organizations, they control... What happens if you go up against a minister or the spokesperson of the ANC? Do you really think your employment after that will be, will be clear of this shadow hanging over you? Or many of these men act very directly against women after that in terms of intimidation and making their lives very difficult.
I wanted to ask you, Precious, the question of predation in the African National Congress, like in other political parties, is big. And it has been identified as a symptom of what is, widespread in our society. What is the ANC Women's League proposing as an intervention to deal with this matter, over and above what we already have, in the codes of conduct? Because, for example, about 2 years ago, the leader of the ANC Youth League in Hillbrow beat his girlfriend to death. And it took a very long time for that case to come to fruition. And of course, that woman's family don't have their daughter anymore. We have seen in other cases like your former chief whip, Mr. Mbolele Goniwe, harassing a woman. I was watching some research with the late Kader Asmal speaking very clearly out in favor of the women. But there's always been, because there are factional interests and politics are about interests, there's always been women who doubt the word of other women and who stand with the men in the organization. How much does the politics of the African National Congress interfere with your ability to show solidarity to victims of predation and sexual violence?
The ANC Women's League has learned and continues to learn to stand with victims. What we did, including in the case that you are talking about of Hillbrow, is that we issued ourselves, firstly, we led a campaign called the Name and Shame campaign that is still an ongoing campaign. And what we did with the Name and Shame campaign was to name, not only in the ANC, but in society, influential people that have been accused of cases of sexual violence, rape, women abuse. We named them and named their position, and to say women and children live in fear because of such men. We named powerful people without fear or favor in the ANC. We named the same guy who killed his girlfriend after the ANC Youth League National Congress. We named him. We were with the family during then, and we continue to speak out. And our contention has been that, firstly, number one, let's speak more about perpetrators, because the narrative always builds up on Karima was raped by John. We want to say John raped Karima. We want to change the way we conversate. We want to change the narrative that because the way we speak as society and also in the organization is that we tend to actually cover up the perpetrator because we speak about the case and not mention the perpetrator. So we said we are going to contend in the way that we communicate and introduce a culture where we name and shame openly those who commit such and bring them to accountability. It's us that wrote to the ANC NEC to say we want a conclusion of cases of leaders and members that have committed violence against women that have not yet been charged and are still in the organization. It's us that said we can't have women. Like now, what is happening here benefits patriarchy, because instead of us speaking sexual violence, the debate becomes about the ANC Women's League shut down, the ANC Women's League and so on. In whose interest is that? It's in the interest of power. Power that is male-dominated. Power relations, gender relations are power relations.
But we must also not forget that women have agency, and the women in the African National Congress have consistently used their agency to back male comrades who are predators. I can't forget the support around Marius Fransman. A lot of the defenders of Marius Fransman were actually women. What are you doing inside your own ranks to actually empower women to have a position that says you can stand with someone who has been sexually violated, who has been predated on, and that is not just loyalty to the African National Congress, because that's often how people in the African National Congress feel, especially young women.
Our conversations have been that the struggle against patriarchy, the struggle for women emancipation, is also part of the struggle towards the advancement of the national democratic revolution. So our people must know that to speak against abusers, to speak against those that commit violence, is a contribution to the struggle in which the ANC believes in. The ANC believes in a non-sexist organization. You cannot have a non-sexist organization if you do not have emancipated women and you do not have women that stand on their legs and women that are not scared of anything. So this education continues. It's not an ANC problem alone, it's a societal problem defined by these power relations that we're talking about, that it's difficult for women to break the silence. It's difficult for women to take a stance with those that have been abused. That's why those that are abused always go through stigma and isolation. It's a societal issue. The ANC is not immune to that, but we're working so hard as young women of the ANC Women's League to ensure that we break the silence, we change those kind of things in the ANC and in society as a whole and everywhere where we are located in our workplaces and so on.
We've run out of time, but Fatima, I want to give you the last word. You involved in the total shutdown movement. Is the African National Congress Women's League part of it, and should they become part of it?
No, I think what we need is for the Women's League to step closer to us. Our experience of the Women's League has been oppositional, and I do agree that unless there's unity in the women's rights sector, we will use these platforms to speak about those divisions. The big challenge before our country is how do we shift prevailing patriarchal norms? And it's not about the rhetoric, it is about seeing leaders who embody that, which is why we do need to see the ANC is like any other political party, but it is the ruling party, so it matters more. So when there are predators in its rank and its leadership, we want to see decisive action against them, and we want to see the action from the Women's League supporting those actions.
All right, ladies, that is where we will leave it. Thank you so very much to our panel. Still ahead on The Fix, we examined the ANC list processes amid unprecedented divisions in the governing party. Don't go away.